It's been so long. Like, I remember us chatting on Instagram.
Man.
Gosh, like for ages. And then when Shy finally moved out to the West Coast, it like all of a sudden the stars just aligned and everybody was like, everybody knew everybody. And I was like, oh my God, this is the best part of OncoPT.
It was the conference back in November. I think Shy was the second person to talk.
Yeah.
And he was like, yeah, I'm based out of Portland. And I'm like, oh my gosh. Like, this really does connect people.
So much. Oh my God. I mean, that's why we do the community thing, right? Because
of course.
I mean, and you and I were talking about this, Alyssa, off camera, but like, I remember how it felt to be lonely and felt like I was the only one here in my city doing cancer rehab.
Oh, sorry.
You're fine. You're fine. Teddy is just outside the room, probably having a meltdown also right now. So you're good.
Yeah, that community is super huge because there's not very many of us as far as like oncology specialists go. So we need to create our own community.
I love that. I mean, yes, definitely. That's why we're doing this, right? So I'm so excited today to welcome Dr. Alyssa Carey to the OncoPT podcast. And as you can tell, we really like oncology physical therapy. And Alyssa is actually one of my former students of Case Report Writing Workshop. And she just went through the specialization journey and took her own exam back in March of this year. So we are still in the interim. We're still in that weird just waiting space until you finally find out those results. So until then, we're just not going to think about that. But I would love, Alyssa, if you would give a little bit of an introduction to my audience, who you are, and anything you want to share on that.
Oh, thank you so much for having me on. I'm so excited to be here. My name is Alyssa. I'm based out of Portland, Oregon. I work in a community-based hospital setting where I'm working inpatient and outpatient and really just trying to do better for our oncology patient population here.
Oh my God. So how did you get started in oncology, first of all?
Yeah. I feel like we all have our origin stories of how we started. And like mine was born out of wanting to be involved in cancer care and then needing to find a way to reverse engineer how I'm there.
Yes.
My background actually started in research. I started at the USDA. I was doing absolutely nothing related to humans. But I had a wonderful research mentor, Dr. Virginia Stockwell. I owe everything to her. I really, really emphasize people to have a good mentor because she is the person who has actually been consistent, even though she's not in the world of oncology or rehab or anything like that. But she's always pushed me to be inquisitive and ask bigger questions. And she's really pushed me to be where I am today.
That is so beautiful. That makes me so like, I have one of those mentors too, who I talk about my origin story as I went to CSM, I saw Nicole Stout and Amy Litterini present, and I was like, oh my God, night and day. But the whole reason I got there is because of a mentor like that. Shout out Dr. Phil Esposito. But oh my God. Okay, so the USDA to now cancer rehab, like where, how, when, what, like tell me.
There's a lot of steps that happened in between there. It was probably about a 7-year journey that it took me from research to actually getting into PT school.
Yeah.
But I was able to do some cancer research, tyrosine kinase inhibitors, anybody?
Oh my God.
That was my area of focus with leukemia. So that was kind of my entry point into cancer care.
Mm-hmm.
But it was interesting after the first couple months of being in that wonderful lab, I was like, I'm missing something. I don't know what it is. And it struck me. It was the person. I was missing the person that I was actually interacting with. And then looking back at that, it was a 3-year stint of me redirecting my career to figure out how do I actually get into PT school. And doors flung open. If I could have like organized this myself, I don't think it would have happened. Wow. But looking day one of PT school, I knew I wanted to be in oncology care. I knew I wanted to be in cancer care. That was my goal. And everybody in my cohort knew that that was my goal. And they're like, okay, you do you. But I had the opportunity to actually do a clinical affiliation when I was in PT school with a major cancer hospital. And wonderfully, when I was in PT school, the APTA actually acknowledged oncology as a specialist or a specialty
Yes.
area. So it was like these little nuggets, like stashed along my PT school career, that I was like, you're in the right place. Keep going. You may have a harder road ahead of you, but it is the right road.
Wow.
So, yeah. And then ever since then, just tiptoeing my way around the oncology world here in Portland. And it's given me a lot of lessons, a lot of learning how to be resilient, but I'm really thankful for all of it. Yeah.
At the time, when thinking back to when you were in PT school and you knew you had an interest in oncology, wanted to be a part of oncology, did you know that PT could practice in oncology like this?
I had no idea what I was getting myself into, to be perfectly honest. Working in a medical university, a teaching university, I had physicians who were half and half. Like they would work in the clinic and then they would come into the lab, and that's where I knew them. And I saw that reflected, and I'm like, well, I want to do that too. And I'm already started in PT. Can I do something like this? So they were kind of they gave me a general roadmap of like, yes, this is possible. It's very unique, but we need people like you. We need people to help our people walk. We need people to help our people get back to their lives. And we know that our treatments are pretty rough on them. So please help us.
So, looking at your patient population now, what kind of diagnoses are you seeing? What kind of, side effects and impairments are you seeing and working with?
Yeah. So being in a community-based hospital, I'm actually spending one day in the inpatient setting and then the rest of the days in the outpatient setting, which is really wonderful because I get to see some folks through their continuum of like, you just had surgery or you're in-house for chemo, and then follow them on the outpatient side. So I've already built some therapeutic alliance, which is wonderful.
Oh my
And then
God, that's amazing.
also, I get to be in front of some of the team members, the medical team members. So that's helpful too. Right now, I'm actively helping to grow our rehab support group, and or who we're able to access. Because right now we're focusing mostly on breast cancer and lymphedema, but I've been able to join with our radiation oncology group, and through them, I've been able to see more head and neck, prostate, gynecologic, lung, colorectal, like all the other groups that also need our help here too.
Yeah.
As far as impairments go, usually it's kind of the baseline musculoskeletal concerns that get people into the door. So, like thinking back to radiation oncology, we see a lot of range of motion deficits that will prevent somebody from being able to lay on the table. So that's one thing that I focus on a lot. Pain with movement, weakness is another thing. As I touched on before, lymphedema is another big component of a person's experience that I help with. Integumentary concerns, so radiation fibrosis or scar tissue management. Fatigue, cannot say that enough. I feel like everybody has fatigue. Neuropathy, and then falls and balance, or that kind of rounds out my major grouping of impairments.
I was gonna say, I feel like you just went down the DSP at that point. It's just like check, 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 check.
It may be a little bit fresh in my mind.
Like good, it should, but I feel like you just, check, check, check all the way down the list there. I'm gonna go off script. Do you feel like the oncology teams that you're working with, and let's start with like the team aspect first, do you feel like they're receptive and responsive to cancer rehab for their patients?
This is such an interesting question, and I will give it to you in two different perspectives.
Yeah.
So the first perspective is the team that I've been really building an alliance with, the radiation oncology team.
Yeah.
Anytime I get a person who has been referred from them, they're like, the team sings your praises. And at first I didn't, I'm like, what are you talking about? And then they'll say, Dr. So and so says that we're specifically recommending you go to Alyssa. And I'm like, yes, here we go.
Nice.
Now I'm starting to see people before they're starting radiation, so I can actually give them a roadmap of, here, I'm going to help you get through this. This is not going to look like your average PT where you're coming in for a set amount of time at
Mm-hmm.
whatever frequency. I'm here to help you. I just need you to communicate with me. And then also the team gets to communicate with me.
Mm-hmm.
Um, from the other side of the groups that I don't have as much of a connection with, I really do feel like I've been trying to use examples like my case report that I wrote to be like, look at what we can do, look at how much we can help your people actually get to, because spoiler alert, mine was about somebody who was trying to get to surgery.
Mm-hmm.
Look at what we can do to get this person to be a candidate for surgery. And
Wow.
I really do think that it just takes time and effort and consistency and continuing to show up, even when you know that the answer is going to be no or not now, that you were the consistent one that somebody will end up going back to. So don't lose hope, is my message in all of that. It can all work out.
I'm
It's
so
just,
glad you said that too, because I really like, and I heard this from somebody else. I did not make this up on my own, but a no in this context is usually a not right now. And so that's something that I've really tried to implement. And I had this really cool experience. So earlier this year, I got reconnected with an oncologist that I used to work like adjacent to. And this oncologist was actually super resistant to cancer rehab. And I was like, ah, well, probably haven't changed. And this oncologist had a total 180 in the time since I'd seen him last. And it really was such a beautiful explanation, like demonstration of it's not right now because sometimes it just takes a little more time. And
mhm.
I'm so glad you said be patient and don't give up hope, Alyssa, because man, is that not the name of the game sometimes in this realm?
Yeah, and I feel like that's actually, to go back to our beginning conversation, that's kind of what we need a community for, is somebody that when we're feeling exhausted, like I've worked for months on this group to see if they would give me patience, that
Mm-hmm.
like the support from your team members of saying like, hey, keep going because I saw it work for me. I know it'll work for you. You're doing a great
Oh,
job. I
love
think that
that.
that is so huge. I know.
Again, I just love cancer rehab community. Like,
Right?
oh, all the things. Okay, so I really want to hear more about your case report. So, spoiler alert for the listener, as we mentioned previously, Alyssa is one of my former students in case report writing workshop. She took the workshop, she wrote a case report. Obviously, it was pretty bomb. If you're now using it as a case study for your stuff. Like, oh my God, amazing. So talk to me about what what did you do your case report on? Who, and don't tell me obviously patient
Yeah.
specifics, but who was your case report on?
So my case report was an older woman who had advanced stage breast cancer, and she had a recurrence. So what got me there was, this is an advanced stage individual who is not really represented in our
Yeah,
research population. And then two, it was
absolutely.
advanced cancer. So I was like, holy moly. But the whole, like, the reason why she was referred to me was because her recurrence was right over the pec muscle and she was having a hard time with movement of her arm.
Ooh.
So
Mm-hmm.
the surgeon wanted PT to get involved to make sure that she had sufficient range of motion, which super kudos to the surgical team, because we all know that prehab is incredibly helpful. But that was kind of the basic outline of her as far as her diagnosis goes. As far as her like personal life went, she was super active. She was super involved. She was wanting to get back to her community volunteerism. So I'm like, yeah, let's do this. Which was, I don't know, it to me that just was icing on the cake of like we're actually working towards like a functional goal, something that we can say in this month you went back to this.
Oh my God, that's amazing.
Right?
Working backwards from that, because there's so much to unpack in your case report, like I can't wait to get into it. At what point did you say, I've been working with this patient population for a bit. I'm not just interested, I'm really invested in this patient population. Oh, there's this thing called specialization. I want to do that.
This is such a good question because at surface value, I was like, oh, yeah, this is the next thing I do. I really love having big goals that I can kind of mark off. But this became so much more than that. This was like, I actually kind of need to do this to advocate for my patients. Where this actually started, or this conversation started, was right after I had finished PT school. I sat down with one of my professors who I had so much respect for, and I was like, what do I do next? What do I do next? And he was so wonderful at not giving advice, but giving just pearls of knowledge. And he said, when you find something that keeps you up at night, that's a sign that you need change. And then he was like, make a 5-year plan and see what comes up out of that. And then just kind of like, I don't know, he's like a fairy godfather that just kind of like like exited the picture but was always still there in the background cheering.
Oh my God.
So I took a job that I was 100% oncology based. It was intense in a really good way. Like I felt like I was drinking from a fire hose, but like I was learning a ton, and it was great, and I felt like I was doing a wonderful job with the people I was serving. But then I started hearing this comment of, I wish I would have known about you sooner. And at first, I just sat in the frustration with these individuals. And I'm like, yeah, I want you to know about me sooner too. But I wasn't taking the torch further. I wasn't doing anything other than commiserating. And that kind of became my I can't sleep at night moment of what are you going to do now? How are you going to push this forward? So looking back at that 5-year plan that had collected a whole bunch of dust, at the 5-year plan or at the 5-year mark, it was to sit for my oncology clinical specialist exam. And so I reconnected with this professor and I said, hey, what do you think about this? And to simplify our conversation, he just said the value of becoming a clinical specialist is not actually in the credentials. It's in the process of learning more, learning how to do better, and then also being more confident about how you're communicating with the whole medical team. I was like, that's it. I'm in. I'm like, here we go. This is going to be a long road, but we got this.
Talk about like what a selling point of,
right?
Oh my God,
right?
Interview done. That's it. Like, and that's one of the things that I talk a lot about on this podcast and on my platform is it's really not the sitting for the exam that makes you a specialist. It's the journey you go through from starting up until, like whatever that end for you is, whether that's taking the exam, whether that's maybe not taking the exam. The work you put into it is absolutely what transforms you as a clinician. And oh my God, that professor, first of all the snaps, what a just masterful grip on that concept and way to just deliver it and put those pearls in your brain to be like, this is it. Like, this is the obvious next step for me.
Yes. Oh yeah. Just talk about like these mentors.
Sidebar, have you gone back and told this professor like, hey, I sat for the exam,
it is
thanks for your pearls?
It is sitting in my inbox. I feel like I don't even need the results to send to him, because truthfully it's like I learned so much in this whole process that regardless of the title, regardless of the outcome, like I feel like I took away the prize. Like, I feel so much better.
Man, I love that so
Yeah.
much. Okay, so you said, I'm going to take the exam, like I'm going to go through this process. Were you aware of the case report requirement before you started?
So, this, you know how they say you don't know what you don't know? I did
Absolutely.
not know much. My understanding of this was born out of like the orthopedic side of things, where I do not think that they
Mm-hmm.
have to do a case report. And my
Mm-mm. I don't think
understanding
so.
is that the case report is so that way we can actually build upon what we have for oncology rehab. I'm like, oh, well, that makes perfect sense. Now what do I do?
Oh, amen to
Yeah.
that. That's for sure. Now, you actually have a little bit of research
Mhm.
experience, as you talked about at the top of the episode. In that role, did you do any writing like this, of writing case reports?
Oh my gosh. Did I bless Dr. Virginia Stockwell? Yes, I did. I will admit, I was going to say that I am somebody who procrastinates emails. I procrastinate writing a report. Like, I will never forget the one time I disappointed her was when I didn't write my rough draft for my thesis. And she sat me down and she's like, "Girl, this is not okay." And I've never felt so much like, "Oh my gosh, I've disappointed my hero." So, for
Yeah.
me, writing has always been just kind of torturous. Like, I don't know where to start. But that being said, have I done it? Yes. Do I enjoy it? Absolutely not. It is probably the reason why I didn't end up getting a PhD or going to pursue my PhD, was because I
Yeah.
realized that I would have to do more and more writing.
And a lot of it
Yeah.
too, not just like, here and there. It's like a lot of writing.
Thank goodness for the people who are really good at writing, because I just have so much respect.
Hmm. So when you found out that there indeed was a case report
Mhm.
as part of your application, what did you feel? How did that make you
So
feel?
many emotions. Overwhelmed is probably the easiest one, the most tangible one to relate to. But it was kind of heavier because knowing that this case report was actually what determined if I sat for the exam, I'm like, oh my gosh, this isn't just something I can whip out in like 2 days' time and hope for the best. Like, I need to be methodical about this. So I think at that point in time, I was like, okay, how are we going to get through this? Because the other papers that I've written in my past, they took a very long time.
I do think that is a really common misconception. And again, like I'm the queen, I'm a really, really good, aka really bad, at procrastinating and waiting until the last minute to do something. Because I am one of that is just me. And I really did have an idea of when I first started like reading about the case report. I was like, I can crank this out in, like over a weekend, no big deal, get back to my life. And boy, was I surprised when that was not the case. It took me way longer than a weekend to do this really well. So when you're starting this case report, you mentioned overwhelmed, not kind of knowing where to start. Even torturous was a word that I'm going
Mhm.
to pull out here as like, this can be a very unpleasant experience for quite a few people. And that is okay. This is where some of us start at. So, at what point did you hear about case report writing workshop and then go on to enroll in case report writing workshop?
Yeah. So this is actually really fun because today is actually the anniversary of me finding a webinar of yours. I think the like
Oh my
coincidence or irony of that is just so amazing. Yeah, it, it popped up through
It's
Instagram and I was
amazing.
like, this is something that I need to do. I'm overwhelmed about. So let's take the 45 minutes to listen. And it just really helped to solidify, like, I need structure to write, and I need somebody else to give me that structure. It can't be me setting, like, I don't know, goals on a piece of paper. I need somebody
Mm-hmm.
else.
Yeah.
And that webinar was like, here you go, here's your gift. Here's your structure you've been asking for. Um, there was another thing on your YouTube channel. It was starting your ABPTS oncology application on the right foot. And in that, there was actually a timed component. So it kind of gives a little teaser of what is in the actual workshop. And having 2 minutes of time to write down everything that I felt, I was like, oh my gosh, this is beautiful. This is exactly what I need. And thinking about like neuro rehab principles about how we like construct the environment to get the outcome we're looking for, you did that beautifully. Like that was what I needed. And I don't know, I'm sure that there are other people who may be a little bit more self-directed, but for me, it was the thing that actually got me through writing my case report. But I just think it's really wonderful that it has been a whole entire year that actually, like today was probably the day that I started writing my case report last year.
Oh my God, I love that so much. Like, talk about full circle. And so, okay, this is not a question I prepped you on. How do you feel as, April 2024 Alyssa compared to April 2023 Alyssa, who is deciding, all right, I'm going to do it. I'm going to start this journey. Like, how can you walk us through maybe some differences between last year you and this year you after all this?
I almost feel more, I feel like I appreciate that I don't know what I don't know, and that I really love this whole process of working to improve my knowledge base. And in becoming comfortable with that, I almost feel more settled of like, I'm okay to say I don't know. I'm okay to kind of delve into some of the sticky questions and come back to a person or to a group and like really kind of massage out a problem together instead of being like, oh, I know how to do this. I know how to do this. So it's kind of made me more thoughtful. It's made me more calm in my responses, which I did not expect that. I expected like, I know everything, but I know nothing.
Oh my God. And I'm going to push back. You definitely know a ton, as we discussed previously. But it is interesting how it kind of, the journey of specialization makes you a little more maybe contemplative of, I know these things, but there's also so much over here that I don't know about. And how am I going to approach that? And how am I going to show up for those patients who do roll through your office or whatever, space that you're in? And you're like, I don't have a darn clue what to do with this. Let's go.
Yeah, I think it got me more comfortable too, asking more questions. Like if I didn't know as I was like in a chart round or something, if I didn't know what an abbreviation was, just saying, hey, I don't know what that means. And not being ashamed of not knowing, but like, yeah, because usually people are always interested in talking about what their specialty is. I mean, put me in a room with somebody and they ask me a question about what I do for work. It's like, how much time do you have?
Because I will talk your ear off. Absolutely. I resonate so strongly with that. Oh my gosh. So back to the case report, kind of logistic side of things. Listeners may know this, but I wrote my case report over a period of many months. And it's not because it was this grandiose, really wonderful, full, flushed out case report. It's because I didn't know what I was doing and then finally got it together to literally squeak by at the last minute of the deadline, etc. How long did you take to write your case report from start to submission?
I had the goal of submitting at the first deadline, which I think was kind of unique to our cohort. I think July 1 was the initial date. So starting in April and going until July, that was the timeline I gave to myself. And I think I had been able to submit it in June because I like to give myself a buffer too. But yeah.
That's
But yeah,
smart.
I was not somebody who could have written it in the matter of weeks. I needed that time, and it
Mm-hmm.
was, I needed every single minute of it, just because I
Mm-hmm.
think sifting through the complexity of a patient case and then also needing to find literature to support why you did what you did, it's an
Yeah.
undertaking. It's a beautiful undertaking, but it takes a lot of time.
Now, we talked a little bit about who your patient
Mhm.
case was. Did you know that's who you wanted to cover in your
I
case
love this
report?
question. Okay, so no, absolutely not. Nope. When I first started this, I had a patient case in mind because it was so unique and it was so like I just invested everything into this person. And what I will say is that there was very little literature to support what like therapeutic interventions we should be doing. So I was pulling from
Mm-hmm.
neuro, I was pulling from geriatric, I was pulling from sports. I was all over the place, which was great, but I don't know that it actually showed my streamlined thought process of how I approach my other patients. So
Mm-hmm.
that to me was that was eye opening. In your workshop, there is a master class that you have. And that to me helped me. If I had never used that, I probably would have written a report and then needed to scrap it and start over again. Seriously,
Wow.
because that masterclass helped me to pick out 5 scenarios and then really helped me to whittle down what is the one that keeps coming up, what is the one that like is actually going to help demonstrate your skill set as an oncology clinician, instead of like this one was really cool. Um yeah i i do not think I would have chosen mine, but I'm so happy that I did. It was-
I mean, clearly it turned out really well because now you're using it as like, hey, oncology team, look at the things we can do together. Like, oh,
yeah.
man, that makes me so excited. So the masterclass that Alyssa is talking about is actually one of the bonuses that's included in case report writing workshop. It's literally called Pick Your Perfect Patient, because that was one of the things I realized after like the first round of case report writing workshop that I did. I was like, we need a 0 point of how do we make sure people are actually starting with a really solid patient case, so like you said, you don't get halfway through writing your case report and then decide to just chuck it because you're stuck and it's not going the way you want to. So I'm really really excited to hear that. If you had stuck with the
Mhm.
original patient case that you're like, this is really cool, what do you think would have happened further down the line had you continued writing that patient case?
I think it probably would have ended up okay, but I don't think it would have taught me anything more about the oncology side of things. I
Ooh.
and like her case was so wonderful and challenging, and I was so happy to be a part of it. But it was like there were a lot of other moving parts and pieces in there that were not just oncology, that I think it clouded out what
Mm,
my skill set was, what I was trying to emphasize as my like
yeah.
what my focus was. So I think it would have murkied the water a bit.
And that's a really important consideration, is you want this case report to demonstrate your competence, right? Like that's the whole reason behind the case report. Obviously, it's really cool to say, I wrote a case report, and then you print it off and show your, friends or whoever, and they're like, cool. But, that's one of the things that it's really hard. That's a very common mistake people make, is they kind of assume that just because they write a case, their knowledge and skill set will shine through. And you actually have to be really
Mhm.
purposeful in not only selecting your patient case, but also making sure that as you're writing through, that your expertise is really like shining through, because ultimately you want the readers at ABPTS or whoever to say, wow, this person really knows their stuff, stamp approved kind of deal. What was most helpful about case report writing workshop while writing your own case report?
What I would say was most helpful was the opportunity to brainstorm. Your structure with the times, like just pen to paper, you have 2 minutes, you have 10 minutes. That was wonderful because it helped to prompt what do I actually need to write about? And without having that, I think I probably would have started my paper off with like, patient is a blah, 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 blah. And then would have tried to trickle things into my report
Mm-hmm.
instead of really looking at what is necessary. And then you can put words around it. At the end of every single module, too, you prompt us to write. It starts off with a sentence and then you have to complete it. And like that is amazing when you link those all together. It's like that is the nuts and bolts of your report. Now you need to kind of add more to it, but that is essentially the skeleton that you should be working from. So being able to look after going through the modules that I had essentially my paper right in front of me, that was incredible. um, some other things that were helpful is just the cues of like, you don't have to come up with the most optimal, beautiful plan of care. We're not looking for perfection. We're looking for a, a well thought plan of care.
Right.
And like mine had some funny happenings in the whole timeline that I was working with her, but that helped me to realize, oh my gosh, this is why I pivoted. This is why I did this. And it really helped me to make a case of, yes, I'm not just following some, I don't know, standard protocol that I found from
Right.
something else, but that I was actually being inquisitive and I was actually making sure that this person's long-term goal was at the center of my decision making.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
I feel like you are teaching a masterclass here
Oh
of like,
my
what do you need to focus
gosh.
on in your case report? And what I really love, Alyssa, is, even as you're going back and kind of reliving this and rethinking over, some of this experience you had, what's coming through in each part of this that we've talked about is the conscious decision making that you're doing. And it's not an automatic thing. Like there was thinking happening. And sometimes, this was something that I experienced in my own case report is, I'd kind of go back through the narrative of like, okay, on this visit, we did this, and this. And at face value, it's like, I don't know why I did that. And then you sit with it for a little bit and you're like, well, what happened that week? What was going on? Oh yeah, my patient had a DVT last week or whatever. That happened in my patient case. And it's like, oh, that's what I was thinking. Like, that makes so much more sense. And, not just in the, oh, I was thinking that. I'm so glad I thought that. For me, there were experiences where I thought, oh, I really should have done that differently. I wish I would have done that
Mhm.
better. Were there any instances in your case report that you felt, I wish I would have done that differently?
Yes. Looking at, so coming from the science background, I love objective measures. At
Love,
one point,
love
I was sifting through like 4 different balance assessments, and it made me think, one, for her case report, but two, for my general treatment, like, what am I doing? I'm spending so much time on all of these objective measures. What is the one that's actually going to address the concern I'm trying to treat? So, with that, it really kind of helped me to refine what I did as a clinician, but two, helped me to kind of parse out, what was I actually looking for in this individual? Was she
Mm-hmm.
having trouble with standing balance or dynamic balance? Why did I choose this other um, balance outcome measure? So it was kind of nice. It kind of helped me to look at my own decision making and at some point be like, yes, nice job. And other points be like, you should definitely workshop that.
Yeah, right. And that's all it is. It's
Yeah.
not, it's not to make you feel shameful.
Mm-mm.
It's just, this is what I did in in that moment. Now with the wisdom you have of
Mhm.
looking back on it, here's what I would maybe change or whatever. Here, and that's how we adapt and evolve into these expert clinicians that we're becoming, right? I love that so much. So, what is something that maybe you wouldn't have included or you would have not known to include in your case report without case report writing workshop?
Yeah. Um, so the care statement is one that I think we all are maybe
Oh my
becoming a
gosh.
little bit more aware of. Did I know what it meant?
Good.
No, I did not.
Yeah.
So
Oh.
that helped me out quite a bit. The other two things that it really helped me out, they sound super silly, but defining abbreviations in every single section, I had to go through and be like, oh, wow. I'd use a lot of abbreviations like TUG for a TUG test or a timed up and go test, and just making sure that that was not the reason why I had to edit my case report. That was really important. And then also the need for a timeline, like a visual timeline. I think on the ABPTS, and I may be wrong on this, but I believe on their website with that packet that they give, I don't
Okay.
remember ever seeing a timeline with that example case report. And I could have overlooked it.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
No, you're right. Based on, so as of the time of this recording, it's April 2024. So if you're listening to this in the future, things may have changed. But in that sample case report that they provide, there is no timeline. That is something that I think as a requirement has been updated since that first round of applicants, went through back in 2019, I think it was. And I think that's one of the things, there is such use in that sample case report they provide, but it also doesn't entirely match what they expect out of a case report today. And that's one of the things, like ABPTS, call me. I'd love to give you some suggestions, but they're not going to do that. And that's something, unless there's so much information that is on ABPTS website that is in that, candidate guide packet that's like 275 pages long or something crazy like that. There's so much information to sift through. It's kind of hard to know what do I need to know when I need to know it, and not just trying to drink from a fire hydrant of like, oh my God, here's everything I need to know for taking an exam ever with specialty certification stuff, right? Like, it's a lot.
Yeah. Yeah.
With the care statement, that is probably the number one cited thing that people tell me. I definitely would not have remembered to put that in my case report. Did you know what that was before you started this process?
I'd never heard of it. And even just Googling it, I was like, oh, okay, there are several care statements. Like I thought there was just one. So that's another thing is like you can cite several different care statements. If you see somebody else reference another care statement, it doesn't mean that yours is wrong. But
good point.
Yeah.
Very good point.
Yeah.
Yeah. When you submitted your case report, what did you feel?
Oh my gosh. I was elated. I felt like this packet, I wanted to print it out and like you were saying, show everybody of like, look what I did. Look what I did. Like put it up in my office and just like admire it. I actually did get to share it with the person I wrote it about, which was probably the best thing. And it was really cool because she got to see how I saw her through a clinician's eyes. And then she also got to see how much she had actually improved too. Like again, it wasn't that she had like she did have challenges in our plan of care, but it was like this is kind of like the wrapping, like the gift that I wish I could give everybody. Like, look at what you did. Right?
That is so cool.
Yeah.
Like,
it was so special.
And we don't get to do that. We don't get to do that always of, really getting to sit with patients. And maybe we should make more time for this, but really getting to sit and, kind of objectively talk about this is how much progress you've made. Because I mean, if anything, that patient is in the throes of the day in and day out and just trying to survive, I'm sure, from day to day, and getting to kind of zoom out with that perspective to see, oh, wow, look at what I've accomplished. Look at what I've done in this time. Oh, man, that is so beautiful.
Yeah, it's kind of like
I would like to do that someday. If I ever encounter the patient who I wrote mine on, I would love to share my case report, because I mean, like, you're also really proud of it too. And like, you did a whole case report. You wrote this whole case report, and it's really, really good. And spoiler alert, it got accepted if we haven't figured that out by now. When you submitted it, sometimes you have to do corrections. The board will come back and say, hey, we need you to make these changes. And it can be stressful. I had to do corrections in my own case report. In the workshop, I shared that I had to redo abbreviations because I did not define them in every single section. Did you have to do any corrections on your case report, Alyssa?
Yeah, I had to do a funny correction. So I got the email. It was like, you need to relook at your case report. And I was like, oh no.
Yeah. Right,
and I looked it up. They make it pretty straightforward as to what you need to look at. And mine was in my citations. So I used a citation generator where I put in all of my references, and then it like made sure that it came out appropriately.
Right.
So when I copy pasted that from a Word document, there was this like random question mark at the beginning of every single one. So just making sure, like, what I would recommend if I could do this again, if hopefully I would be okay doing this again. I know, right?
That's so exciting.
As somebody who doesn't like to write. But what I would recommend is just putting it in a Word document and making sure that all those funky things, have somebody that doesn't even read it look for those things for you, because I didn't catch it, and it was right in front of my face. I had 30 question marks that were, oh my gosh, yes. That was a dumb moment.
And, you know, those are silly mistakes that we make as humans. And that is one of the benefits of having someone else look at your case report. Someone else's, like, I would encourage multiple, because you just miss stuff. You just miss stuff when you're so close to that case report for so long. I mean, I couldn't even read English at the end of it. I was like, I don't know what this says. Like, whatever. What would you tell somebody who is considering case report writing workshop?
Yeah, so I want to emphasize that I did not have to rewrite anything for my case report, that I hit every single bullet point. I don't know that I would have done that on my own. My only corrections were question marks. So I want that, let the record show. Advice that I would give to listeners about starting their own. We need a community of rehab providers who are passionate about oncology. We need you to write this. Coming from somebody who did not want to write a case report, but so badly wanted to do better for the patients that they see, it was not that bad. It was not that bad. We as a community need you, but also your patients need you. And if you've made it this far into really just kind of diving into this community and then also this podcast, I think you have what it takes to write a report. Like, you can do it. If I can do it, I promise you can do it. Yeah, that's kind of my big takeaway.
I love that. I really do believe that everybody has a case report in them. You, in your time on this planet, have encountered a patient who has taught you lessons that we all need to learn from. We need to hear what that is, because there's no way, even, you know, I've been practicing for almost 6 years now, give or take. I haven't encountered all the diagnoses there are. I haven't encountered all the treatments and side effects. I haven't encountered all the patients with all their uniquely human characteristics and experiences that make cancer rehab what cancer rehab is, right? There's no way I can know all of this, and it's only by sharing this information that we're really going to be able to do that. You're making me think now, like, how can we facilitate this a little more? Anyways, that's an off-air conversation. Stay tuned. I might have something in the works based on when this podcast comes out. For the person who is considering specializing, period. So we're not even at the case report level yet. Alyssa, what would you tell the person who is considering dipping their toe into specialization in oncology, but just isn't sure?
I would kind of go back to your why. What kind of keeps you going? What keeps you, kind of like my professor had said, what keeps you up at night? What keeps you engaged in trying to do better? And I know for the individuals that have sat for this exam or do identify themselves as part of the oncology community, I think we all kind of have that passion of like, ooh, it's rough, but it's worth it. Like learning and being uncomfortable is not a comfy feeling, but just being uncomfortable or being comfortable with being uncomfortable is a wonderful thing. And I think we will find that as time goes on, you'll probably see more people who have a history of cancer than you may realize. And just kind of using those instances to reflect of like, did I treat this patient any differently? Did I see that like I was actually comfortable and confident in treating this individual? Because we need more and more people who are comfortable with this. And I don't know, I would just say like also lean into the members of this community and feel free to ask questions. Don't worry about feeling like you don't know the answers, because most of the time either we don't know the answers or we've been really close to just learning the answer of what you are asking. So I don't know. I just love this group. It's just so welcoming, and like I've never felt ashamed to ask a question, and it's just a really great place to be. And even if you find yourself that you're not an oncology specialist, there are things that can carry over between like sports and neuro and orthopedics. Like we all work together. This is a community of
100%.
complex people that need people who are willing to sit in the nitty-gritty with them.
First of all, I just have all the warm fuzzies from that answer. Like that's just so beautiful. And we might have to have like a more flushed out conversation on this, on the concept that you brought up, which is we probably don't like we don't have all the answers, period. Let's get that out of the way. But the people who are in this community that like the listener is looking up to and is like, wow, I want to be like Scott Capozza, Alex Hill, Alyssa Carey someday. I don't think we are as far removed from finding out that information as we are thought to. Like I learn new stuff all the time and I'm like, I should have learned that by now. And it's okay that I don't, because there's just so much information out there. And to echo what Alyssa said, this group really is cancer rehab, period. OncoPT is so inviting and encouraging, and that's one of the things that I've really fallen in love with. And I think why I've stayed doing this for so long is because the people I've always shown up when I needed them to. And that's been everybody's experiences that I've talked to. So I just love that so much. Where can people connect with you, follow you, if they want to keep this conversation going or ask you some more questions?
Yeah, I would love to connect with anybody who has questions, because the only reason why I'm here is because other people have answered my questions. And I don't know, don't be afraid to send an email, even if it's to somebody who has a big name in this field. I guarantee you they will answer. But my Instagram is kind of more dog and mountain oriented, but I'm at Run Alley Run on Instagram. And then I don't think I have a Twitter. I do have one, but I do not actually participate in it.
That's okay. That's okay. I feel like you are so responsive on Instagram. Like we chat probably like once a week. So it's perfect.
That's where you're going to be most successful finding me.
Yeah. Same. Alyssa, thank you so much for this conversation today. It was so, so wonderful to hear from you and hear your perspective. I do want to read your
Oh,
finalized case
yeah.
report, and maybe we'll work a little magic to see if we can't facilitate that process over on the OncoPT specialization
Yeah.
community. We'll see. Stay tuned, dear listener. But anyways, thank you so, so much for your time today. I really appreciate it. And until next time, this is Elise with the OncoPT. And remember, you are exactly the physical therapist that your patients with cancer need. So let's get to work.